Welcome back to Island Tea with your faves, Kevon and Amali, and we are joined by our friend Roma Richardson. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody who's listening. Good morning, Kevon and Amali.
She in here. Ready to terrorize. So before we jump into it, we like to ask our guests to tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is you do, so the audience can be familiar with the person that's about to terrorize the airways.
Okay. Good morning. Again, my name is Roma Richardson. I'm a Kittitian. I've been here like forever. Other than when I went to university. I used to have a program on another radio station talking about sex and sexuality. It has become one of my favorite topics to talk about, and that's what we're talking about this morning.
Awesome. So where we would like to start?
But this morning we're talking about sex. Okay. So off the I asked Kevon and Amali if they had any questions. Kevon said he has questions, so I'm really eager to hear.
Are you ready for the questions now?
Yes.
Why do we? Why? Let me rephrase it. It is necessary for children in schools to be educated about sex and sexuality. It is not. Why?
What's the question?
Why do you think we are so hesitant about teaching children about sex?
Maybe it's just that we're teaching them weird things.
Because we teach them all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
And all sorts of scare tactics to keep them away from participating in something they are essentially inevitable in participating.
They're told to have a lot of everywhere else.
You know, they have it wrong. They have it unsafe methods and all sorts of stuff. And you know.
That's what I mean by wrong, like unsafe.
Yeah, when I say wrong, you know, they do it unsafe. They do it with it in ways that are not is not very safe.
Well, part of the problem is that some people are just ashamed to talk about sex. So sex still has all of the stigma and taboo and so on that's associated with it. Sometimes big adults have difficulty talking about sex. So imagine talking about it to children. And of course, people have legitimate fears about teenage pregnancy, about transmission of STDs and so on. So there's something valid about like the hesitance in terms of, you know, the life outcomes that can happen. But those things are only addressed or prevented if you actually talk about the thing. So if people actually know how to go about protecting themselves, how to go about ensuring that sex is enjoyable and pleasurable for them and their partner, those are the ways that you can address the very issues that they're trying to fight.
Okay. What's happening here? Okay, so when do you have would you want to see sex education in schools?
Sex education kind of exists in school and it's supposed to under health and family life. It's just as Azem said, sometimes people teach it how they want to and they omit the parts of it that like, you know, are relevant. So I remember growing up in high school, all we used to learn about was abstinence really, and so, you know, you had the abstinence t-shirt there and I was like, buy the t-shirt and wear the shirt, but it didn't necessarily mean anything.
And nobody taught you what it actually meant.
It didn't necessarily mean anything.
I think a lot of times it also just takes this very biological thing. So these are the parts.
Right.
And
this is how you put on a condom if
right.
they get that far. But they don't talk about like how you talk about sex with your partner, how you even think about sex, sex and psychological wellness, sex and enjoyment.
Right. One of the issues that and we've spoken about it here, one of the issues that I feel needs to be focused on in our sex education is the whole idea of consent. Because I do believe that there's even adults that don't necessarily understand what consent is and the importance of what role it plays in sexual interaction, right? And I think that's something that needs to be taught, and something that it puts a lot of us in very uncomfortable positions, right? And instead of helping us to avoid uncomfortable positions, because we don't necessarily understand, like you said, the conversations that need to be had and the power that we have to give or take back consent.
So. That's definitely true. I mean, we have such like misguided views about how to do things here. So like people feel like, okay, if somebody said no, all you need to do is pressure them a little bit, and then that no can turn into a yes. You have ideas about just approaching people and working upon them, if you feel like it, or touching people however you want. Like here we are very, physically close-knit kind of space, right? So sometimes it's like, okay, I'll reach over and think Kevon and expect.
Kittians, we have a physical culture. Like we're very physical, handsy with each other.
Yes, we handsy.
You see somebody, you see your friend, you tap a shoulder,
rub them down, and sometimes it's not even your friend.
Yeah,
and you just feel like you're kind of entitled to to people's space, so that when they respond and are like, I don't really like that, the other person is blamed for establishing. Those boundaries.
She bougie,
right.
She better than people, and weird, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, consent is one of the things that definitely have to happen in conversations about sex. And of course, you would talk about consent before you actually have the sex. And people have talked about like enthusiastic consent versus non-enthusiastic or unenthusiastic consent. So enthusiastic consent is, just as the word suggests, you excitedly say yes. It's not that you take silence as consent, because silence is not consent. You want people to verbalize that yes. You want to know and see that they're into it, So that's something that has to be done. And great sex is almost always comes from great communication. So one of the things that I saw when I was reading up for this show, because that's what I do, someone said use your mouth, and it's good because it applies both to communication and to sex if you are interested in that. So like use your mouth, actually articulate the things that you're interested in, what you like, what you don't like. Articulate your boundaries as well. Ask your partner to like, what are you into? What do you like? What do you want me to do to you? I mean, those things can help to serve like multiple functions, including making sure that everybody is consenting to what is happening. But also you could actually get aroused from asking somebody, okay, well, what would you like me to do? Or the other person can get aroused by you telling them, okay, like, this is what I want you to do to me, and so on. People talk about involving technology in the conversation. So like, you send the person, once y'all agree that this is okay, a nice little message while they're at work describing wherever, and it builds that excitement. So communication, it don't have to be dry and be like, all right, where would you like me to put my, and it could make for very great sexual experiences.
Like everything, communication solves almost every issue, but we just don't like to talk to each other. So.
At all.
That's true.
You mentioned enthusiastic consent, and then is unenthusiastic a word? Consent that lacks enthusiasm. Let's dive some more into that. What would you use as an example of giving consent unenthusiastically?
Okay, well, someone, let's say you're already there, maybe both of you are already naked and it's about to start. And then the person is like, okay, you ready? And you're like, okay, all right, you could go ahead, I guess. That don't sound very enthusiastic to
or convincing.
Or convincing. And sometimes it's like, the person really doesn't say anything, but you could tell from their body language that they're not resisting. That they're not feeling it too.
There's apprehension.
And whenever you see apprehension, the appropriate thing is to stop, and be like, we don't have to do this if you don't want to do it. Are you comfortable with this? I can stop. It's not to be like, all right, you kind of say yes, so let me just continue. That's when you end up in prison.
I have a question. I have a question for you. And, we talked about the different types of consent and stuff. But something that is we often hear Kittitians talk about is that there's this strange dynamic of pursuit where some people, and it's both genders, not just women, they feel as though being hard to get is how to get them. So then you also have people, you know, that have lived and breathed and eat this I have to chase you down to get you, so I have to fight for what I want kind of mentality. And then you have to try to get them to understand consent, which is difficult, because then, you know, for them it's like, well, I got to take what I, you know, I got to go after what I want. So then how
and it
do
goes
we
both ways, Kevon.
right, that's why I said it goes both ways, because you know,
we are, if you do not pursue after the initial
denial,
the initial block, then it's seen as you weren't really interested.
you weren't interested, you didn't really want to get me, you didn't try hard enough.
I'm gonna, because when I talk to people, like, I listen to what they say, like me and trying to pray and thing, and he will say no, like it's not, you know, I'm not asking you again.
Like you didn't work hard enough.
And then I will meet the same female like a year on the line, and she said, "Boy, I used to like you, not bad enough." I said, "By trouble you and you ain't take me on." She said, "But you ain't try hard enough." And I'm just like,
that wasn't the impression you were giving me.
Right. And some people is like, you know, they have to be convinced, or like you had to pressure and pressure and pressure.
You got to show me that you're interested. You got to prove to me that you're worth my time. And,
and even physically, I've actually heard, I can't recall it ever happening to me, but I've heard stories of, you know, a man and a woman would be laying in bed or whatever, and he would attempt to, you know, move the situation into that direction, and she would resist. And the next day she was like, "What happened last night?" And he'd be like, "Well, you resisted and so."
Like, no, that's a big thing.
But if you want to, you should take it, or you ain't hard enough.
No, but
or just because
I think like a lot of things are happening in those scenarios. Like one of the things too is like, remember, women are taught that they ain't really supposed to be eager about sex, and they're definitely not supposed to be forthright. They're not supposed to be the aggressive ones, and so the impression is that if the person says okay, like on your first ask, it might mean that, oh, this person easy, this person has done it a million times,
perceived as a whole.
And you know, so there's that, and I think that's like, you know, an understandable kind of response too. But then people also are not owning their sexuality, and owning their sexual interests and their desires and so on. So there's like just all of this clothing sex. I mean, that could be solved, you know, or could be addressed if people would just like talk about it. Maybe sometimes though, people do like being, you know, pursued. If you're talking about like bondage and sadomasochism and things like that, where it's like people establish, okay, yeah, I like it.
I want to control.
This is the dynamic, right?
Yeah. So it's like, you know, every relationship is gonna be like individual specific, and that's why it's important to talk about it. So it's like, if the woman or whoever it is genuinely without like, you know, societal prescriptions or thoughts, and so is interested in having that person like pursue, then she can say, listen, this is what I like, right? You know, this is what I enjoy. I enjoy when somebody run me down, hold me, whatever, make me feel wanted and so on, you know. But people just need to talk about it.
Yeah, I definitely think, you know, if you want a certain dynamic, you make it clear, you know, chase me. That's what I want you to do. So then when you have, you know, now I give you permission to do that, versus me just expecting it, and then I fuss in the morning, how come you ain't chase me down?
Part of it is a test, and that is the problem. Test too, test, I tell people, don't test me, I can fail. I can fail. No, like, don't test me, I will always fail.
And people aren't mind readers, so it's like,
oh my gosh.
I mean, you do like one thing, okay, not one thing, but you know, you're accustomed to having sex a particular way, you know, these are what you like and so on. With a new partner, you can't come in expecting that person to know what you've been doing for the past 20 years. It's almost like starting over again. So it's like you could come in and be like, okay, well, you know, I've come to really enjoy X or Y or whatever, but you can't expect, oh, this person been doing it for 20 years, so they must know how we go. Everybody is so individual, and like sexual preferences are very like specific to who you're actually dealing with.
Oh my gosh.
I could
I hate the mind reading, boy.
I could switch lanes a little bit, and the reason for this is it's based on the story I've been following with T.I. and Tiny. And I don't want to talk specifically about that, but it did raise some questions in my mind, because I want to be very careful here, because these thoughts were triggered by the situation, but I'm not talking about them or the victims or anything like that. The issue of people being in uncomfortable situations and using substances to try and become more comfortable and stuff like that, and how that dynamic plays into the experience. So, for instance, I would have had a friend who came to me in confidence. This was a while back, and she woke up next to someone. It was someone who she had been intimate with before and had they weren't in a relationship, but they were intimate before this particular encounter. But she woke up and could not remember if she gave consent. She blacked out because she had been drinking, right? And so she was very uncomfortable with the position she was in, because one, she doesn't remember if she gave consent. So she didn't know if she could say something and potentially threaten this guy's freedom, right? And so that this whole thing with Tiny kind of bringing back that scenario to me, because I feel like there's a lot of situations where we don't take full responsibility or accountability for our actions in terms of what we ingest and what we put into our bodies, the things that we do to make us comfortable and loose and whatever, or even in some people's mind to enhance the experience, and how that plays into the feelings after and before. And I don't think that's something that's normally talked about, and I think that's something that's a discussion that I would like to hear more of. Is there a reason why we don't, in your opinion? Or I think it's important. Do you think it's important that we have those conversations as well?
Yes, but I think it's important that we have the conversations on both ends. So you as the individual, being mindful of your surroundings, of what you're drinking, making sure not to leave your drink here and there and everywhere, sticking with your friends if you have friends, not necessarily wandering off. But on the other side is the person who takes advantage of that, or the person who isn't necessarily so aware and isn't thinking, okay, well, if this person falling down in the drain because they're drunk, I probably shouldn't try to have sex with them. Because there's a list of...
You have the opportunist.
Right. And there's a list of, situations or states that you or anyone can be in where you can't give consent, and being drunk or under the influence is one of them. Obviously, we know a minor can't give consent even if they say yes. Right. Legally, it will not stand up. Same way, if you drink and you're drunk, you can't give consent as well. So the person who is on the other end seeing that needs to just be and even if the person is throwing themselves at you or whatever, you just be
there's a responsibility.
Just calm down. I'll make sure that you get home safe, that you're in.
Oh, where's your friends? You ask the questions. Where's your friends? Oh, they're over there. Okay, let's go to them.
Even carry the person backstage and be listen, this person can manage on their own. So
make an announcement or hold security
somebody
something.
Yeah. But none of that really happens, So
right.
the conversation has to happen on both ends.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times too, there might not be anyone who is in a state to be responsible in some of these situations. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's just being mindful. I think there's sometimes where people unintentionally get to a place where they might not have their full.
It happens every juve.
Yeah.
Every juve, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to drink one drink. Next thing, the food punch or the one punch that you had was really, really strong, and that was enough to knock you out. So sometimes you don't even intend to do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's unintentional, you know?
Yeah, it does.
That's why I keep telling people, like, you gotta be mindful, because I felt her discomfort at the time, like when she was talking to me, and then like seeing these situations again where there was obvious like drug use involved and things like that, and how does that play into the whole dynamic? If everybody drunk, if everybody, you know, a little high, if everybody a little nice or whatever it is, like, because I didn't have the answers. I was like, so he was drunk too? She was like, we were drinking, like we were hanging out at his house, we were drinking. So I was like, well, because I don't want to tell her, don't say nothing, because, well, you don't know and you might like screw up this entire dude's life. I don't want to. I said, like, you gotta talk to somebody.
There are no answers, and I actually spoke to a counselor in Canada about this once. And when she finished describing to me, you know, what basically the options were and thing in terms of the dynamic and what comes into play when two people are intoxicated and they end up, you know, having sex, right? Basically, what came down to it is who got to the police first, right? And that's really, really unfortunate, because, and that brings me to my last question for you as well. I was thinking about it, well, yeah, we're having a back and forth. The whole issue of quote unquote blaming the victim, right? I understand that there are people who would actually literally blame the victim and say, well, you shouldn't have worn a panacea and thing. But I believe that that term is loosely used when people actually advocate for women especially to take some responsibility for environments that they're in, actions that they take, and the company that they're with. And when I say loosely, I mean, we spoke about it the on the show. If somebody breaks into your house and you call the police and the police come to assess the situation, they say, well, how did they get in? And they say, well, I left my door unlocked. The police will be like, well, you really shouldn't leave your door unlocked. I mean, you know, people are on the street, they're thieves, they're criminals, they're hungry, whatever the case may be. You call them back a week later for another break-in, and they come and say, well, how did they get in this time? And I say, I leave my door unlocked again. They're going to start to wonder, well, you're just irresponsible. Like, the first time you call, they ain't coming, right? And I believe the same goes for teaching our children, the boys and the girls, from a very, very small age up to when, you know, they get to adolescence and adulthood, to take some accountability as it relates to the things that they do. I have friends who I went to school with who would go downtown to the club and get blackout drunk and wake up in somebody's bed who they ain't know, and tell the story the next day and then do it again next week. So what is your stance on the whole, the phrase blaming the victim and how it is applied to situations like that where people can actually take steps to protect themselves against, because there are monsters out there. They're rapists, they're murderers, they're kidnappers, and we all in society have to play our part in protecting ourselves from them. We buy burglar bars for our house, and our doors are unlocked for a reason, because we know that there are people out there who will break into the house. I'm not saying that if somebody
they have a right to do so. If there's no,
they're not right to do so by any means. However, but we understand that there are different types of people in society. So, what is your take on the whole term of blaming the victim and how that plays into how people apply it to different situations? Because I think it's a very sensitive thing to discuss, and not many people discuss it for fear of being accused of blaming the victim.
I feel like I would start by saying the only thing that can prevent rape is rapists not raping. So people should, even if it's irresponsible or whatever, be able to get drunk, fall along in the street, and nobody do you nothing. You should be able to do that.
I would love for that to happen as well.
We aren't living in that world, but the solution isn't to tell, because there are so many instances where there's no alcohol involved, there's no drugs involved, you wasn't in a dark alley, you ain't had on a short pants, and those things still happen. Which comes back to, like, really the only thing that can prevent it from happening. It's people not doing it. You could take all the precautions that you can, and it could still happen. So, like, I will never blame a victim. My stance, personally, is to believe the person who has come forward. That is, like, immediately, like, and just naturally what I do, right? So I don't need innocent until proven guilty and then kind of things there. I just believe the victim, because it takes so much for you to come out and say this thing happened to me, right? So it's like the only thing that can prevent
so you believe that you know, believe the victim. Anybody comes forward, the first instinct is to believe them and to support them, etc. What about the person who is accused? Because there are several instances where people are wrongfully accused of these things.
Yeah, but the percentages of that are small.
No, but at the same time, it does happen.
But the percentages are small. And compare that to the rate at which we disbelieve survivors or people who come forward and say that has happened. That is the false rape claims. I found it book earlier. It was 2 to 8% or something like that. Very small. And the rate at which we disbelieve survivors is 90-something%. It's almost automatic that if someone says this happened to me, especially dependent on who the accused is, it increases the likelihood of the person being disbelieved.
Yeah.
So.
But I don't think that is specific to sexual cases though. I think that's just how we are as humans. Like, it's if somebody come and tell you bye, I tell the priest hold $5 to me, and the priest just walk out and give me $5, and be like, really? Why? Or if you go to the bank and say I really and truly, that teller there just take my money and just. You're gonna be like, why would they do that? You know? So my take on all of this is, I don't think we have to pick a side. That's why I don't like the idea of feeling like a picking a side. And not specifically what you're talking about, where there's accused and potential perpetrator. I'm talking about in situations where like Amali was talking about, where things may happen and people might have felt like they were in an uncomfortable position for whatever reason. And there wasn't an intended infraction, right? Generally for me, even in cases where there were, I can say that forcefully engaging with somebody sexually without their consent is wrong. And I stand by that, and I believe that. I could also say, and I believe that I could also say, that we have a responsibility to protect ourselves. So I don't think by me saying that we have a responsibility to protect ourselves absolves the perpetrator of the
and that's
consequences.
My point.
I think that's what happens. We usually do this thing where we want to pick a side for fear of.
And sometimes we want to do both of those things at the same time. So it's not necessarily in the moment where somebody has said, you're at the police station, for the police taking your case to be like, well, next time you should, or this is what you should.
No, time and place, definitely.
Right. So it's like,
and it shouldn't happen right after
you learn, right? And so you decide, okay, well,
and this is why I brought
necessarily want to give up on the drinking thing, but next time I will go out with a friend who is responsible, take different precautions, and things like that. But
that's why I brought up the whole thing about instilling it in our kids as well, our young boys and our young girls as well. The same way parents tell the children, don't jump into a stranger's car. Don't speak to strangers. Stick on this side of the street. When you're coming home, walk on this road.
But you also need to tell people, don't kidnap the children. So both of the conversations have to be happening.
Yeah, but the people who kidnapping children, no, it's wrong. Telling them not to kidnap people ain't gonna change nothing.
Okay, well, I don't. Maybe it's not conversations, Maybe it's stiffer penalties.
And reporting and people, talking about what they see, that kind of, because we recover many things.
Right.
Right, and family members would know that they have a son or husband that does trouble little boys, trouble little girls, and will keep it to themselves.
Right.
So the society has a part to play. Everybody has a part to play in it, in keeping these people at bay. Because these people, if you, as a father, something your own man, think it's okay to molest a 6-year-old girl, you have a mental illness, right? You're sick. So it's not as simple as just saying, bye, you shouldn't do that. The person needs help. The person needs help, and the person needs other people in society to actually come forward and say, listen, my brother, like he has these tendencies and we need to sort out this here because people's children are at risk, right? And that's why I say it's important for us to just instill these values in our kids from a young age to protect themselves and to take precautions. Just like how...
And respect others as well.
And respect others. Just like how, when you go to university and so, one of the main rules when you go downtown is never leave a drink unattended. Right? And that goes for everybody, not just women, because there are sick people who like to play sick games or who have these mental illnesses who just want to mess with people. Right? And they're among us. You go down Full Street now, there are people who are rapists that are walking past you. Right? We don't know who they are, and that's why I think it's important for us to talk to our kids. Talk to our young girls or young boys, when you're walking home, make sure you're coming home with somebody, blah, 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 walk in these areas. When you're going out to party, if you want to take a blackout drunk, that is your right, that's your privilege. But just ensure you have somebody with you that you trust that can take care of you in the event that you become, incapacitated, for example, right? Because it's unsafe for anybody to be blackout drunk and they know where they be, man or woman, right? So that's just my thing there. But people are afraid to have these conversations for fear of saying, oh, wait, so you're saying it's she fault, she get raped? Or you're saying it's she fault, the man should blame it?
Yeah, like the positions are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are sick people and we need to protect each other from them, period. But that's just my take on the matter.
All right. I mean, the only thing I can say is, but simultaneously,
Of course.
Teach, yeah.
Of course. We must teach it like when it was by.
We must not normalize sexual violence. We must not treat it like it's a regular part of life or like a rite of passage, Yeah.
We have to teach the kids about consent and about mutual respect and
and we
about
have
boundaries.
to continue to teach adults about it as well. And to know that, because the person is a small child, it doesn't mean that you are entitled to that child. So there's that too.
Yeah.
So much.
It's a lot. But we all have a role to play, like I said.
We do. Yeah.
Like I said. So
definitely agree with that.
we can't remain silent. So Jade, if you know of anyone that needs help, please come forward.
Good advice.
I will, thank you.
And I will as well.
Yes, you should.
I will as well. I don't know anybody though.
Well, Roma, we hope to have you back because I think this conversation needs to go on even longer. So,
and we didn't even fully talk about talking
right?
about
You come with your whole ledger and we reach what, 2 sentences?
Just close it,
Save it, mark the page because we can bring it back. So maybe next time we could do like an hour so we get even more time, which still ain't gonna be enough.
That's why talking about sex is so important. We didn't talk about talking about sex, but it's like, there's so much that spills
avenues
over into just like how you operate in society,
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Okay, bye.
Oh Lord. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our show. It's Hump Day. Hump Day.
Sorry.
It's okay, express yourself. It's a semi-safe place.
Consensual hump day.
I see what you did there.
Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you for noticing.
That's outrageous. Anyway, thank you folks for listening, for joining us here on WINN FM 98.9 once again on Island T. Please drive safely. I said they're making haste with these traffic lights by.
But they're wasting no time.
Wasting no time at all.
I need them to finish up the roundabout though.
Huh?
Hey, speaking of which.
By the airport?
Yeah. Speaking of which, I realize how smooth the traffic running with no lanes in the roundabout. But I digress.
Yeah. The airport roundabout, because they dig it up, they ain't got no lanes, and it's smooth sailing.
Fascinating, eh? But okay. I said this Friday, the lanes, one lane going into 2 lanes, going back into 1 lane, logically doesn't make any sense.
Yes, sir.
You're creating a bottleneck that didn't exist prior. You literally created a bottleneck for no reason, because there wasn't one before.
Yes, and you have people crossing over each other in a roundabout, and it's dangerous. Anyway, When it makes sense, it makes no sense. Making sense, it makes no sense. But, drive safely, don't drink too much and drive. Please try and use the roundabouts correctly, except the one at the airport, which has been dug up, so it's working wonderfully by itself now.
Indeed.
Without arrows, without lanes, without signage, and it's just a breeze.
Something coming, you stop. Nothing coming, you go.
Exactly. It's fascinating, my. Anyway, we got missing about one time. And our friends at Public Works. But yeah, drive safely. Don't drink too much and drive. Use the roundabouts correctly. Please indicate when exiting the roundabout. Don't overtake in the roundabout.
You're laughing and it's true.
And don't switch lanes in the roundabout, please. Also, please remember to park your vehicles in a responsible manner to allow our waste disposal engineers to collect our trash effectively and efficiently and on time. If you park bad, the truck can't pass. You can't pick up your garbage, you can't pick up your garbage, your street smells stink. It's a health issue.
No, we don't want that.
We don't want to back up our trash on nobody's street. So please, guys and ladies and in between, do the right thing and back your car responsibly. And lastly, I plead and I beg for our Attorney General, the Honorable Vincent Juicy Byron, to take some time to sit with us or anybody else to address one of these archaic laws we have in St. Kitts as it relates to 1, sexuality, and 2, what kind of second one was?
How you phrase it? But basically, the disparity between how we treat our young boys versus how we treat our young girls.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Justice for Jack one.
We want equity. Justice for Jack one, indeed. So what we'll do is one of these days, mainly we can sit down and go through these laws and amend them and then
pass it on.
Pass it on.
No white paper.
We won't just views. We bring suggestions and solutions. And if you know us, then we can go down
Mr. Limo House.
Church Street and pick it.
Go to Mr. Limo House. Yeah, we got to go.
And pick it. Anyway, and lastly and most importantly,
you can't be everybody's cup of tea because you're not a mug. See you tomorrow.